All right, recording is on, and take it away.
Awesome. So today we're going to have Danilo, who's one of the core members and contributors of Block.Science and cadCAD and cadCAD education as well. Talk about snippets, what they are, how to use them, and also how to create and contribute your own. All right. Thank you, Danilo.
So yeah, um, I'll share my screen. Let me see how I do it here. Okay, are you seeing here? So, so last week I've created a snippets folder here at the demos repository of the cadCAD.org repo. And the main idea of the snippets is to have little pieces of code that we can utilize across projects and the main idea is that we have to the demos which has a story behind it and that shows, let's say, a complete working model. But a lot of time is we just have some quick hack that we use for doing some specific feature or some tiny piece of code that we just want to share. So the snippets folder comes to be that. So it makes more easier to share, but also way less work also to showcase some kind of integration of feature. But anyway, the structure is as follows. We have a readme here where I've put here a description for several snippets that I've put before. So for example, one of the snippets, which is the minimal predator notebook, is a pre-predator model, but it's a minimal version of it in the sense that, let's say, you have the entire model in just one notebook instead of you having the traditional folder structure. We have also this interpolated time series snippet that shows you how you pick some numbers and you interpolate a time series from that and get into a simulation. We have this memory buster snippet also that shows you an example of a model where, let's say, you quickly run out of memory. It's useful for debugging. And also a snippet for the execution time, another snippet for metadata inside the purchase date blocks, and another for generating cadCAD diagrams. Also, there was a recent contribution recently that is this psub map label snippet that was submitted by Victor, and I thank him for that. But anyway, I'll show one snippet so that we have a glance of how it works. So I'll start by opening the minimal predator one. And the reason being is that the good thing about having a minimal model is that it makes it more easy to you to have create any snippet, because a lot of times we are working on projects, we have another much bigger and much more complex model, and it's a bit hard to, let's say, to just pick a CAD code and put on a file that is without context. Having this minimal predator allows you to, let's say, having something that you can wrap around. Uh, but anyway, as I said, this minimal predator is just a notebook. You have the usual predator things like, for example, variables for the population, parameters for the birth and death rate of both prey and predators. You have policies in one block, state update functions in another block, partial state update definition in another block, a block for execution, and also a figure here. It's very brief, and that's the idea behind it. It's just when the use of it is when you just want to have a quick model to try something. And based on this model, I've created some snippets here, like, for example, the psub metadata and the diagram one. So, for example, here at the diagram, let me refresh here. Okay, so for this diagram snippet, the intent of that is just to show how the cadCAD diagram library works. So I've imported a function for it. Uh, and well, as usual, we have the minimal predator model. But at the very end of it, I've called a diagram from config method so that we have a preview of how is the simulation structure. So this is just an example of, let's say, how you would create a snippet. And of course, it's always welcome to you to put some description. Like for example, I've put here this is a mini demo show called the cadCAD diagram plugin, which allows the users to create visualizations. Documenting is important, but at the same time, I think that the most important is to users is that, let's say, the community share their hacks. A lot of times it's way better to, let's say, just have a quick description and post whatever code you have. I think that only by having the code public helps a lot of people. And there is also this PSUB metadata, which shows how you can use metadata on partial state update blocks for doing pre-processing, post-processing, or whatever you like. So the idea of this snippet is that, let's say, as usual, we have the prey and predator model, just to make it clear. But the idea is that at this time, we have a decorator. We define here a decorator, which is this print time, that when you decorate a given policy or state update function, you can have the execution time of it. So we have the definition here, but there is a use case here where you can put, let's say, some flags on the partial state blocks, like for example, uh, put a given block to ignore or another block to not actually to ignore here and not ignore the first. You could also have a debug flag, but anyway, you could do pre-processing in the sense that, let's say, you could pick the partial state update blocks list, and you do a pre-processing in the sense that you apply some list comprehensions, in the sense that, let's say, you update the variable here so that you drop everyone which the ignore flag is different from is equal to different from false. And also there is this another operation here that for each policy I apply a decorator so that I have the execution timing. So this is another example, and actually the idea of this folder is that eventually we will fill with, let's say, a lot of examples, and let me see if there is another interesting one. Probably I think that the interpolated time series is a good one too. So this is another demonstration where, let's say, we have some points on time. There are sparse points, so we have 1 point on January, another on February, actually 2 points on February, and another on March. And how we include them on the CAD model. So here I do a practical demonstration of how this is done. So we pick those records here, we transform it to a Panda series. There is a method here that generates interpolation from time series. There is a lot of comments, so the user can follow along. And we have a basic cadCAD model which consumes from that. So we have this time step series parameter here where we get the interpolated series variables, which actually is the original records, but applied to that interpolation function. And the point is that when we do that, we can create a simulations where, let's say, here you can see the headline. Uh, you can have simulations where you get a fuzzy time series, you interpolate and apply something on that. But as usual, the idea of this, the idea of the snippets is just to, let's say, show a practical way of how you could do an isolated thing. And just to finish the presentation here, so about contributing, the best way to contribute a snippet is actually, it's very easy. You just create a notebook or create a Python file, bot will do, and you submit a pull request to the folder. You don't need to be super rigorous about the standards. I think that the most important thing of this snippets folder is to, let's say, it's to make it easy to share any tricks that you got, any kind of knowledge. Uh, and of course, we'll be thankful if you also edit the readme file and put a quick description here so that users have some idea of what this is about. and that's it. It's really that. It's just a pull request.
So I don't really have a question. I love everything about this, but I couldn't help but sort of draw connections between the purpose of snippets and also the purpose, or rather the intended purpose of the CLI, which I'm working on, and
Mhm,
especially in terms of the minimal prey predator thing, which I think your intention there was not really so much the predator prey model itself, but rather having a starting point for a new all-in-one model of any type, right? And I just wanted to say the CLI, this
mhm,
is that exact use case. If my assumption is correct, that exact use case is like the
mhm,
primary purpose of the CLI, which I want, and I've already started doing this, but I want people to be able to scaffold out new projects with working functional models in them in an
mhm,
all-in-one or a more complex um, model structure without
mhm,
having to like go to GitHub and cut and paste or clone a Git repo or something like that. Or I've literally heard of people just having
mhm,
like folders on their desktop with different model structures, and they just literally cut and paste the folder every time they want and make modifications to it.
mhm.
Um, so I'm wondering if maybe that's something we could explore more, or talk a little bit more about where we draw the line between snippets and the CLI. And is
Mhm.
the CLI a good fit for snippets? Is scaffolding out a snippet, for example, of any type, something that maybe we would want to do, or should it be separate?
I
I
mean,
guess this is kind of a hodgepodge of questions, and I don't have anything in particular I want to know. I'm just curious about the intersection of these two things.
yeah, maybe the way that I see it is that, let's say, the intent of the snippets is to have a organic way of sharing knowledge across the community. So let's say in that intersection, what I see is this SLI eventually sort of consuming the snippets in the sense that, let's say, the snippets will provide inspiration and building blocks for features on the CLI. Uh,
Yeah, I think that'd be really useful. So incorporating things that we get from the community at large, just in the form of snippets, incorporating them into CLI templates, that would probably be
yeah,
the
yeah,
most
I
appropriate thing.
definitely can see that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think this is super useful. Um, I think snippets are really interesting from an educational standpoint because I feel like um, it gives us an avenue for really isolating um, a particular, or highlighting a particular thing that you're trying to demo, or um, bring attention to, without the added complexity of the rest of the context, the rest of the environment, which is something that I think a lot of people new to modeling struggle with, where they're trying to see how it fits into the bigger picture when trying to get one particular question answered. And a lot of times the answer might be really simple, but in their own minds they sort of convolute it, uh, or complicate the answer because it comes with all of this extra stuff. But if we can isolate things into small snippets where it, just removes everything else, you don't have all that added complexity. It might be easier for people to sort of grok what it is that you're trying to teach them.
Yeah. By the way, all the snippets on the folder, they are actually working models in the sense that, let's say, if you
Right.
download that notebook and run, it will run without errors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's not a neat feature.
Yeah. Cool.
So just to close the loop on the snippet CLI conversation, are you guys sort of seeing a workflow where it's like you import a snippet while in the CLI tool, and then there's a workflow in the CLI tool to sort of designate how it might be templatized? Is that sort of the picture in your head?
maybe in the
Yeah.
future I would actually build some programmatic pipelines for it, but I think it should probably be so conceptually the way the CLI is going to be maintained by the community, outside of like the actual Python script that creates the structure, is it relies on templates being created, right? And the templates are sort of your recipe for how you want to build or scaffold out some sort of project. So I think what will probably happen is that we will get these references or these ideas from snippets and build our own templates, or somebody in the community will be able to build their own template. It'll be a manual process, but they can include, stuff that they've learned from the snippets, or potentially you could take the snippet and use that as sort of the source material for generating or scaffolding a new project even. um, but like in regards to the predator prey model, I have a template already called normal or default or something like that, which is like a really standard all-in-one sort of model of medium complexity, um, that does the exact same thing. It includes like all the various parts of a cadCAD model that you would expect, but actually does something. Only the predator prey model does something interesting. The model that I currently scaffold out doesn't. It increments a value which doesn't really have any real world. It's not interesting, right? So what I may do is actually take the predator prey model and just swap that into the default template that I use that ships with the CLI. So whenever somebody runs it to create your default normal project, it'll be a functional predator prey model. Maybe.
Yeah. By the way, the reason why I've put the minimal prey predator model and used it as a template was because I had a snippet here on my computer that, let's say, it was sort of heady. And that's the idea of the snippet folder, actually. A lot of people have heady code that are, let's say, stored somewhere, so we are giving a use for that.
Excellent. And one thing we've discussed really early on, and sort of I think it's opportune to resurrect at the moment is the idea of sort of design primitives for a lot of the systems that we come across in terms of modeling them and sort of creating a design primitive library, if you will. And I think snippets is a really good way of executing on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we may have lost. Yeah, we lost some of his back. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the snippets are a like I said, a really good showcase for that. Those sort of design principles that are cadCAD specific, but also I guess just systems modeling specific. That might be new to people coming into the space. They might not really be familiar with those concepts. But like I said, I think one of the biggest um, benefits here is that we're really removing all of that extra that we don't need when trying to communicate a simple idea, a relatively simple idea, to somebody new. This really allows us to just have like bare minimum skeleton around some idea without all the extra stuff. That's, I think, super useful to us. And it's cool to see a number of projects already in there too, or a number of snippets rather.
Snip, snip, snip. Cool. So I guess the question is, do we have you've already generated quite a list already, Danilo. Is there a backlog you have in mind of other snippets that you believe should be created to sort of seed the community creation of snippets so that they kind of get a sense, okay, these exist, I get the idea of what I should be doing, and then sort of have the inflection point of the community generating a bunch of snippets?
Oh, I think that the list is actually sort of endless in the sense that
Of course.
in the sense that, let's say, I do have some snippets here that I still didn't publish, but also there are a lot of, let's say, things that you read across the community and you see that it could transform into a snippet. I mean, it isn't hard to think about that list.
Right. I'm just curious if there was sort of a specific list in mind or could be generated that you think would be beneficial either internally, but also just in terms of uh, the community generation of, hey, let's just build libraries of snippets because I think they're cool. I guess I'm asking, is there a list, and what would that list be to seed seed that growth in the community?
If we could get a public list too of like,
Yeah, that sounds
desired snippets or something like that that was publicly
Gitcoin grants.
available. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. This is
yeah,
perfect for these Gitcoin grants, which and I'm really interested, especially early on in the Gitcoin grant or bounty program, to really focus on things that help the education of people new to this. And snippets are like perfect for that. So yeah, if there is a backlog, even if there's not right now, if we could put something together and have it available in the repo maybe, or in the wiki or something, um, we could start to sort of prioritize that, and those would be potentially really good um, early test bounties, I guess. Right?
yeah, because they're small, they're sort of low hanging fruit and well defined and
Yeah,
confined in terms of the
yeah,
scope. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to be very easy to community to add items to that list. And also, a thing that I was trying when I was helping some people over the community was to, because sometimes people had questions, and after I answer to them, I sometimes I say, oh, if that works, do a PR here, do a PR on the repository. So, for example, we got a snippet with that, the submap label, and it's a nice snippet. So sometimes also, let's say, the snippets can also sort of serve as, let's say, as a conclusion for a, let's say, for a support workflow.
Excellent. So I'm curious with everyone else we have on the call here, Barwin, Ben, um, Jeff, also Roger. Nice to have you. It's always great to see new faces. Um, are there any current projects or pieces of work you're endeavoring on where you could see snippets being useful, or you're trying to figure out how you might want to incorporate snippets?
Yeah, I think something, I mean, Danilo has passed on a lot of hints and snippets to me over the last month or two. And I also was wanting to know about different workflows around modeling, whether that's test frameworks or things like Papermill and generating notebooks, things like that, that I think could definitely become snippets as well that aren't necessarily notebooks. So maybe we can also look at creating markdown documents within that folder if it makes sense for different sort of data science type workflows related to cadCAD.
Right, but
I,
the distinction being that instead of running inside of a full-on notebook, it would be like a lightweight markdown version of that, intended to be sort of, instead of executed, in line, it would be more just cut and paste reference.
Yeah, I guess you could actually put anything in a notebook. I think you could still put it in a notebook format. Yeah.
yes, I think, Ben, that's interesting because you're sort of pointing to the idea that snippets are just an object you can reference in relation to another object. And I think when it comes to the labs platform itself, that sort of concept is going to be very important for preserving data science workflows attached to the actual sort of cadCAD modeling.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm excited about the snippets folder. It's already got a lot of useful examples. Things that I've personally, like whenever I start a project, I create a file called Scratchpad and add it to gitignore so that no one else can see it. And that's where I throw all these types of snippets in. And I think I've seen that before in other people's models.
Yeah.
So all of that's going to come out the woodworks, and we'll see what we get.
Yeah, I think yeah, basically I was just doing something similar, and I was late to this call. I was helping another project where really they were actually really stuck on even getting something as simple as like pretty much as simple as one of these snippets to run, and they were just so new um that they tried to just add kind of like one or two little nuances, and couldn't essentially recover. um so yeah, I mean, I think it's useful, and I should point out that that person even had done the cadCAD edu course, but we're actually still kind of lost. So um and that person is should have been able to do it, but couldn't. Yeah, so I think like even that kind of starting place is correct. I think it's like we're still gonna always have that, some of the issues that we talked about before about, okay, how did you choose, why did you choose, and how did you figure out how to choose X, Y, and Z in creating this, and so I think it's hard to always predict what the level of prior knowledge someone else has coming in.
Well, that's sort of interesting, right? Because then I think we're talking about is snippets as sort of objects within a DAG for an attribution network almost.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah, in
then
some
what you're
ways.
saying is right, and then what you're saying is okay, you can sort of figure out where people are in terms of their own progression and journey on sort of the gestalt of knowledge you need to like do all this complex system modeling by seeing which snippets they sort of grok and which ones are a little bit beyond them at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think ideally, it's they're gonna choose the one that closest matches the problem. But again, like if they haven't thought through the problem, or correctly, or in such a way, maybe they choose where you're probably right that they probably choose where they're most comfortable, versus versus maybe the one that's closest to where they need to go.
Right. But if you have a DAG of attribution network of types, you can sort of, kind of the way people will, fall down Wikipedia rabbit holes, right? You just sort of click the links through of things that are related, and then you might get close.
It's almost like a dot to dot of education, right? You move from,
Yeah.
okay, I kind of understood this, now move on to something that's related but takes my education just a little bit further.
Yeah.
I think figuring out that path is the real trick,
Mm-hmm.
and especially as we continue to build out, the wiki and the demos and tutorials and now snippets and all of these other amazing resources that we have, it can be kind of hard to classify them, but also just from an external point of view. Like if I'm looking at a Jupyter notebook, um, for the first time, I don't really have any sense of the complexity level. I mean, I could look at like, some arbitrary metrics or seemingly arbitrary metrics like lines of code or number of files or, but it's really hard to sort of know this notebook over this notebook would be better for my education level right now, or this one's better at explaining this particular concept over that. I think that's really where we're going to struggle with the education is,
Yeah.
how do you make that path? How do you show people, how do you funnel them into the right direction, I guess?
I think that's absolutely dead on. I think it's a lot of a curation problem, and it's very by hand. But I do think having at least the relationships between content more explicit than is traditionally done facilitates the ability to curate.
Absolutely. Well, my personal anecdotal experience is that we are suffering from a pretty severe gap in really elementary level type models and explanations.
Yeah.
We're just still a little bit too complex for a lot of people. And I feel like the feedback that we've gotten on the educational course has been, at least from some of the people I've talked to, has been similarly down that same vein of I learned a lot, but I'm having trouble bridging this gap, right? I know the steps that I need to do. I don't understand why I need to do them, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like Snippets is going to be a really good um, avenue for exploring some of those. Here's why we do something like this. It's a very isolated example. There's not a lot of cruft or meat to it, but enough to sort of demonstrate the purpose or utility of some mechanic or procedure. And the more snippets we get, the more, of varying complexity, of varying um, things that they highlight, it just gives us more path to then point people to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Which
think
is
something
great.
else as well is that, the idea of modeling and simulation appeals to a lot of different multidisciplinary people
Yeah.
who you don't necessarily know, are they software developers, data scientists, economists, general enthusiasts, and they all come with different experience. And to do a full sort of end-to-end project, you generally need a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna probably find people will take different paths depending on where they're coming from. And
Yeah.
I mean, even Block.Science builds teams around these projects that are multidisciplinary, and not everyone's expected to know everything. And yeah.
That's a good point. That's why we have multiple people on these teams. Each got a different perspective and background on things.
Just from a new perspective, though, the snippets are great, but I would have no idea to go find them if I didn't see them come up on the Telegram chat about um, the P sub labeling. I would never have known they exist. There's just such a sea of information that you don't know where to start or where to touch. So if there is going to be more noob-friendly stuff in snippets, I, some guidance on where to start looking, where to start scratching, I think is a good objective. Because right now I find myself scratching in different corners, but not digging in deep enough in anything because there's just so much.
That's
The code
absolutely
is great, but it's also where to from there. It's like metrics. I really want to figure out like where is more info in metrics. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern that I'm aware of. So my experience with modeling was nil up until about 3 months ago, and when it came to like trying to get up to speed, I was basically told, "Oh, you should talk to this person. You should talk to this person." And each of these people had their own little treasure trove of resources that they thought was, you know, the best, sort of information out there that would help me. But what I learned is that at least a vast majority of what we need people to know, to learn, in order to sort of onboard them into the community, a lot of it already exists. It's just spread out. And like we were talking about a little earlier, just having 1,000 links doesn't really help anyone. We need to
Yeah.
start making sense of all of these resources and sort of helping create these educational paths or these onboarding paths for people, at least with a little bit of guidance, through some loose categorization or difficulty ratings or a number of things that we can do to just sort of help let people make informed decisions about where to look for certain things. One of my big initiatives personally has been to take all of this sort of disparate information and consolidate it into the wiki. It's
There's a
been
wiki?
yeah, there is a wiki in GitHub. Yeah, so I don't mean Wikipedia's entry on
For sure.
cadCAD,
Didn't
but
realize it was that.
yeah. So,
That's
and
great.
then the other thing is in GitHub, the GitHub source view, right? The file structure hierarchy view or whatever. That is sort of the readme.md. That markdown file is everyone's entry point into the software, and it's where a lot of people, at least with software backgrounds, are going to go for how the hell do I use this stuff, right? So that's the entry point for a lot of people. But what I want to do is start linking from that file to the wiki, and even in conversations and meetings that we have, I would like the wiki link um, to start being sort of the entry point for people when it comes to education and documentation of the product. So yeah,
Yeah,
there's not a lot in the wiki right now, but that is kind of where I want everything to go eventually. I don't know if everyone agrees that that's the right place, but I feel like it's a valuable tool for this exact problem of connecting all of the dots and helping to create pathways for people.
At this stage, I'm less concerned about where is the right place, and more about like solving the problem that there's sort of a diffusion of authoritative source.
Yeah.
Right? Because right now, like if you go to cadCAD.org, there's like a one tab link that just has like, I don't know, 20 different links
Yeah.
to go to. And they're
Yeah.
just sort of like all over the place. And I
Yeah.
think in a sort of like a quick and dirty solution, that was great at that point in time.
Yeah.
And I think we have to mature into, we have just sort of like, hey, here's the one place you need to go to get sort of a good overview of like where the hell is everything.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and I think, Roger, that's exactly to what you're pointing to, um, as sort of a user experience problem. And then from there, then we can sort of pay attention to, okay, there's sort of different paths of mastery for the different folks, as Ben was pointing out, like where are they coming in from, what are they trying to do, and we can carve that out of that sort of centralized source of truth that you're talking about, Tyler.
And I think we've got a number of consolidation efforts that are all pretty good. So, right, so like I would say there's probably three or four little, bastions of information that people have like put together in notebooks or in personal GitHub markdown files. I know Z's got text documents on text documents on text documents of just links and random references. But I've seen bookmarks. A lot of people have bookmark folders for cadCAD that are over 100 long. So there's a lot of these little isolated places where I think anyone would find some value if they were directed to them. But what we really need to do is stop having a lot of pretty good sources of that single sources of truth and really just get behind one in particular and just update everything and really push it hard.
Can we make that a
I think
Gitcoin
that would
bounty?
probably, yeah, we could. I mean, I've always felt like documentation, at least the consolidation and aggregation, not necessarily editing and really proofing it and making sure it all makes sense and is correct or up to date, but just getting everything together, I feel like that would be a pretty good uh, entry level bounty, and it's actually on my list as one to present to Dog and Jeff. So
Yeah. I mean, you could even give like one die for submitting your little data hoard, right? And
yeah,
then, yeah.
yeah,
I was thinking you're going to battle to scale if you don't get that path in, because all you're going to do is consume everyone's time if the project does start scaling. And I think this project will start scaling once people start realizing what it can do. So I think it might actually be a very poignant thing to focus on.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I've sort of felt like there was a looping mechanism here too, where the when it this can kind of be taken in context of the Gitcoin bounty process, which has highlighted some issues for me, where internally, the cadCAD org and Block.Science teams, we're spending a lot of time educating people manually, one on one through videos and chats and and whatever, and it's just eating up a lot of resources. But one benefit that we get as a byproduct of you know paying for people to create these entry level demos, tutorials, and snippets and consolidating documentation is that only alleviates a lot of the friction in the onboarding process, which in return means more people are able to onboard sort of self-sufficiently, right? Without having to rely on us so much. And the more that the community builds and gets bigger, those people become resources to new people onboarding. And it becomes sort of a self-sufficient community that can educate itself and new members itself without having to defer to the experts at Block.Science or whatever, which is what we rely on almost entirely right now. So
Right. Yes, and
hopefully it snowballs.
I also think there's sort of the element of whenever you go from 0 to 1, you have to do things that don't scale at first because you have to sort of learn from experience the hard way. What is it you're going to do that sort of um, scales the effort later, right? So every interaction you're having, trying to explain and teach someone new this thing, you're actually learning how to teach it better.
But I think it should be a phase and not a way, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it's just you're gonna have to repeating the same thing again and again.
Yeah, it's a phase because due to the maturity or lack of um, in the project at the moment, and also the I think public knowledge around the topic itself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we got to start ironing out a lot of these processes so that like you said, we can't really scale doing the manual tedious work that we're doing now. um, one big problem too with having all of these, just in terms of like all of these different resources, is that too much um, of too much of that stuff is falling out of date, or getting too old, I guess, to be useful, and can actually be more problematic than useful. Whether it's models that were created on older versions of cadCAD, or just whatever. There's a lot of information out there that is A, hard to find, and then B, when you do find it, it's oftentimes not even good data to be, or good information to be consuming. But by sort of pulling everything into one area, it allows everyone to sort of bring a focus and an attention on the content itself. And hopefully that helps us keep it more up to date and relevant.
Yeah, and partly why I wanted this call to be recorded was so that we can take. We're already having the conversation. Might as well document rather than have to create content. Right? So we're having the conversation about snippets. We can take that content, and then now we have a thing without having to create a whole thing to explain snippets outright. And I mean, we'll eventually do that, right? But we can at least leverage the time we've already spent in a more scalable way. Well, anything else on snippets? I know we've sort of ventured into a little bit of education working group sort of territory as well, which is fine and good. I see Marcus has joined us. I'm assuming you're familiar with snippets, and if not, you can
Let's
ask
do it
away.
again.
Hey guys, sorry, I have to stay muted for most of the time because my neighbor is tearing down their apartment. So I'll be noisy. Yeah, I haven't familiarized myself with the snippets yet. I saw something about it on Slack, but haven't gone through them yet. So I'm looking forward for the recording.
We have about 12 minutes left. If there's just general sort of public service announcements anyone here wants to make, any questions anyone wants to sort of pose to the group about the state of cadCAD from a technical vision point of view, we can dig into that.
One thing, not to dominate this call, but it is somewhat relevant to a lot of the things that we've been talking about too, where um, I am finishing up some labs work over the next few weeks, but my big push immediately after we get that thing into an alpha state is to revisit cadCAD engine internals to make the boilerplate for new projects easier for people, because right now there's like, I don't know, a dozen lines of just config shit you got to write in order to get things up and running. And it doesn't need to be that way. That API, in spinning up a new project should be easy, very minimal. So that's kind of a big push. But on top of that, sort of hand in hand with that as well, is that I'm going to start working with Josh to move us being the engine, to semantic versioning, so that we don't run into these situations anymore where patch versions or minor versions are meaningless because they have breaking changes. And we just need to get, we've talked, to Chris about this a little bit too, but a part of that will probably be, along with semantic versioning being introduced, also introducing regular development builds or release schedules, right? So that there's something a little more dependable than what we've had in the past. And hopefully this makes it easier on people writing models, not having to wonder why your stuff never runs, depending on who's trying to run it. It'll be a little more consistent, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to
Okay.
say I'd be keen to see sort of the integration of tests and regression tests and things like that into the repo. I know the tests exist, but I don't think they're being run. I might be wrong. Yeah, it'd be awesome to have some good tests for different model types and different things you'd assume to be working as you do the updates.
We have a couple of integration tests that test. I think we have one that tests like parameter sweeping and a couple other things like that, but the coverage is non-existent. Basically, we have maybe 3 or 4 tests that are written. Only 2 are being run right now for some reason. I don't remember why. But the one thing that we don't have, and I'll be working with Josh on this too at the start of the new year. We don't have any sort of unit test coverage, like none. It's non-existent. And ideally, we need to have both, right? But I feel like a lot of these hot fixes that we keep releasing are because of mistakes that unit tests would have caught. But it's just not familiar territory, or hasn't been. But it's on my radar, and I know it's something that we need, so it is coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of a continuous integration push, really, right? Everything you've outlined, and it's I think it's worth sort of having offline discussions around scaling that effort as well, because it's absolutely right. I mean, it's part of maturing the project, right? Like maybe we just need a build engineer for a certain period of time to get that up and going. But I think, Ben, I want to make sort of clear there is sort of like the continuous integration sort of testing that Tyler and I are talking about, but there's also that came up earlier in the R&D call, the like state attestations. Um, that is a form of testing as well, more on a model basis, and I want to sort of make clear that to disambiguate those two.
Yeah, for sure. I think the testing of the sort of state outputs, that's the state doesn't change for a certain model with a certain update, kind of makes sense. I think that would be a great thing to have.
Cool.
I just wanted to bring up, I think I saw, Roger, you posted in the Discord about naming of state and policy updates in the robot and marbles tutorial. And I think there's a good number of people involved, both on the tutorial side and the cadCAD edu side here. I don't know if that comment was already responded to, or feel free to get some clarification in this call, because I think we have all the stakeholders here.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on Discord yet, but yeah, I just going because I'm trying to work through all the documentation that there is, and there is inconsistencies between what was taught in the tutorials and what's done in the course. So, I mean, I'm going through it anyways. I might as well just update everything as I go along with a fresh set of noob eyes. I can catch a few things. I think, and just make everything consistent. If guys are keen.
Yeah, I can take a look at that. what channel was that conversation in?
I think that's Edu.
You said?
I saw that a while ago.
Yeah.
I, I'm totally in favor of that. When we did the tutorials, we didn't have those sort of those conventions in Block.Science, and if I recall correctly, the ones that cadCAD is using are the same that we use internally. So seeing the tutorials be refactored to comply to those would be great.
Yeah, and this is a really good conversation for me too, because I feel like a lot of these um, conventions, I guess, we only know about internally, but this is a very good place for me to sort of push this by way of the CLI, right? So ideally in the future, most people and most projects are just going to scaffold this out, and a lot of these naming conventions are just going to be a byproduct of that scaffolding. They won't really have to worry about that. They can obviously deviate from that if they want, where it makes sense. But yeah, we can definitely update that, and it should be updated. This is exactly what I was talking about, where things fall out of sync. It's just old, it's dated, and needs to be updated. So yeah, I see your messages here, Roger. So I can update that for you and help you out there.
Well, I didn't really need help. I mean, I'm going through it anyways, so I might as well do it. I was just wondering if that is in line with what the community needs or wants. Don't want to step on anyone's toes.
No, you're definitely able to do that, and we would really appreciate it. Just if you're comparing the two, I would tend to err on the side of whatever's in the cadCAD edu course
Yeah, for sure.
should be
The
taken.
P underscore function name, S underscore function name, previous history instead of just SH. Yeah. If there's any more that states what your internal protocols or formatting is, if you can send that to me, I can work with that as well.
The only caveat I would add there is that in the tutorials, in the Robot and Marbles tutorials especially, as it's very entry level, we wanted to keep it we wanted to make it so that everything was self-contained within the notebook. So we didn't use any imports. We didn't use the conventions that we normally use, where we separate the files within in parts directories, the sort of stuff that you see in other models, like the Uniswap model and Predator and Prey. We aren't using those conventions because we wanted to make it more simple for a newbie to read. Yeah, more accessible. Yeah. So, but as far as the arguments naming conventions and the policy functions and the state of state functions naming conventions, I think all of that could use some updating. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll take care of that as we go through.
Awesome. Thank you.
This is awesome to hear, and this is exactly partly why we're doing these sort of like you know semi-private, semi-public working group calls to have invested community members join us on this. Just sort of, I guess, points of clarification for, I guess, executing on this. Is there a good point person, Roger, or anyone on this call for Roger to sort of coordinate with? It sounded a bit like Tyler, maybe Marcus. I just so that we don't drop the ball here.
I'm happy to help if Roger needs any guidance. It seems like he has a good handle on everything. I'm happy to review the PR
Cool.
and get it purchased.
Yeah, whatever you want to do or don't do, I'll make myself available as a resource, so you can just ping either of us to get the help you need if anything.
Thanks, guys. I don't think it shouldn't be too much admin on this. It's just copy and pasting.
Yeah. Cool. Wonderful.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. So I think we're at time. Thank you so much, Danilo, for presenting on Snippets, and Jeff for getting the recording going. Just tag me when you post it, Jeff, and I'll make sure it's in all the different channels that it should be linked in.
Sounds great.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you, everybody.